to.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to be here. And Beth and Kim, thank you for bringing the spotlight back on plastics. Before I hand it today to our speakers, I would just like to take a couple of minutes to talk about 2 points. The first being that as environmental groups and as sustainability commissions, I believe that it's very important for us to really change the narrative on plastics, which is that we cannot think of plastics as only polluting our oceans anymore. The scale and the overproduction of single-use plastics has made it a climate change issue. Plastic production is also an environmental justice issue because it harms the health and well-being of the communities that live next to these facilities. And the toxic chemicals that are used in plastic packaging and containers are harmful to our health. And the second point that I'll make is that we need bold solutions in order to make an impact to plastic crisis because recycling has failed. Last year, the Canadian government designated plastics as a toxic material and then went ahead to prohibit the manufacture, import, and the sale of 6 categories of single-use plastic items. Our speakers today, they're from both national as well as local organizations, and they've been working very hard to bring about both policy as well as non-policy related innovative solutions to deal with this crisis. They have the tools, they have the frameworks to help communities make a difference. So we'll have each one of the speakers present first, and then we'll take questions in the chat at the end of the presentations, at the end of all the presentations. So first we have Megan Wolff. Megan is the policy director of Beyond Plastics. She's a medical historian by training, and prior to joining Beyond Plastics, she worked as a policy researcher at Weill Cornell Medical College. Megan enjoys digging at the historical roots that help explain how problems developed and what might be done to solve them. Her decision to focus on environmental policy came from a growing sense that the most pressing public health threat we now face is climate change, a feeling increasingly shared by other health practitioners. Megan holds a BA in English from, oh Megan, I'm gonna spoil this, Wesleyan University, and a master's and a PhD in public health history and policy from Columbia University. In addition to lectures and classroom teaching, she worked for many years as a walking tour guide in New York City. She lives in New York, Hudson Valley. Megan, take it away.
Well, thank you. You didn't butcher Wesleyan at all. It can take it anyway. I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Let me share my screen and start my slideshow. So Seema invited me to give kind of an overview of the plastic pollution problem, and we have a lot of panelists and not a lot of time, so I'll try to go as quickly as I can. Because I work at Beyond Plastics, we focus on not just the problem, but the policy solutions that we think are going to work in order to try to make an inroads on this problem. So as for my lens as a historian, I have been taught that history is not inevitable. The more you read history, the more you see that people create history. People's actions are contingent on what they're doing, on their historical circumstance, and problems that they have created are not inevitable and are therefore solvable. And that's really true both in public health and medicine and also in climate change. I've noticed very much since I've begun working at Beyond Plastics that the scope of the problem seems vast, but it's actually at the blink of an eye historically. So let's take a quick look. We have nearly 10 billion tons, 10 billion tons of plastic on the planet right now. And it is a massive problem. We don't need to go into exactly the scale, but it's the time scale that I'm really interested in. About half of that plastic was produced in just the last 15 years. On this graph, you can see it's really not until about the year 2000 that we start to go up. And the problem is that we're on track to keep going up and up and up and up. We're only here. So if we think we're buried now, we've got a couple things coming, or many tons of things, frankly. But to put it into perspective, 15 years is the lifespan of my cat. This is a 15-year-old cat. that is not a very old problem. It doesn't take too much to think about how we can think our way out of this problem. We have other materials than plastic. The hyper creation of plastic really only began in a very recent period. In fact, our biggest goal at Beyond Plastics is to try to have the production of plastic 50% reduction in 10 years. Well, a 50% reduction in 10 years sounds like a very tall goal, but that's the year 2000. And think about where you were in 2000. Just to put a little bit more context on it, that's the year 2000. So pretty easy to remember where we all were in 2000. This was November 13th. We were not all walking around saying, you know what I think we need? I think we need more plastic. We were able to contain our beverages and other items in what we had. I like to think of it this way with plastic. This is an old adage from history. The invention of the ship is the invention of the shipwreck. Plastic, when it was created, it was invented in the late 1900s, and it only began to proliferate after World War II. But it was a miracle material. It's lightweight, it's durable, it's inexpensive to manufacture, and it lasts and it lasts and it lasts. And that is the problem. Our use of plastic as we now use it is a design flaw, because we're using it for things that we use literally for an instant. And then the plastic is with us for a lot more than a lifespan. We used to say, oh, you know, in the 80s and 90s, it's going to take thousands of years for plastic to decompose. We were wrong. It won't ever decompose. So that's not something that you want to use just for a momentary purpose. And that's what we're doing. This is the plastic that's being produced right now and what we're using it for. You can see this longest graph right here, the long bar is packaging. 42% of the plastic being manufactured today is used for single-use packaging. That in itself is a problem, but it's not an unsolvable problem. So where's it going? Well, okay, 275 million metric tons of plastic are used each year around the world. The United States is the #1 user, by the way, by a landslide. Some of it's incinerated, most of it goes to landfill. This tiny little loop here is recycled plastic. About 2% of plastic winds up being recycled into something else that's usable. The rest, landfilled, incinerated, mismanaged is its own category and its own lecture, and ocean plastics. Now, that doesn't look like a very big proportion of the plastics, but it does create a huge problem. Between 8 and 15 million tons of plastics enter the ocean every year. And we're choking on it. It is literally killing the ecosystem that's within the oceans. Now, when I first saw this, I thought, well, how's it doing that? Is it being dumped in garbage barges? It's actually much simpler than that. It goes in through rivers. What's littered on the land winds up in drains and rivers, and eventually in the ocean. And some of this has to do with the export trade in used goods and plastics that cannot be recycled or incinerated or landfill, that wind up being sent to places that don't have services for waste, like waste management services. So Ecuador, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, they wind up having to put it in the rivers to make it go anywhere. And that's how it winds up in the oceans. So once it lands in the ocean, the wave action and the sunlight fragment it. Like I said, it's not going to biodegrade, but it will degrade. And plastic, once it goes from larger fragments called macroplastics, it goes down and down and down until it grades down into what we call microplastics, which are particles smaller than 5 millimeters wide. A lot of them look like a grain of sand. These guys are nurdles. This is actually the feedstock of plastic. When you make plastic, it looks like this, and then you melt it into the Barbie dream house or your toothbrush. But nurdles are also instant microplastics. These are microfilaments. These come from synthetic materials like fleece jackets or any kind of like a rayon or polyester nylon dress. They constantly come off of those synthetic materials, and they do this. They hang around and around. And they're going to continue to break down until they become nanoplastics, which are smaller than the size of a human blood cell. More on that in a minute. This should give it some perspective. So this is a microplastic filament on a snowflake. Microplastics are so small that they evaporate with water and become part of the hydrocycle. They go up into the rain and are rained down literally everywhere on Earth. So they have been detected at the top of the Himalayas. They're in the Mariana Trench. They're pretty much everywhere. They're also inside plants themselves, because where water goes, plastic goes. So this is a cross section of a microplastic inside a plant filament. This is pretty dark. We know that when microplastics become involved in plants, the crop yields drop. That's the very beginning of what we know. We're also beginning to understand that microplastics are very heavily involved in plants right now. There are actually a lot more microplastics in soil than there are in the ocean. This has to do, we think, with some of the rain coming down, but it also has to do with the way in which fields are fertilized. They often use sewer sludge, and that sludge is going to contain a lot of microplastics. And pesticides and fertilizers themselves often contain microplastics. So this is one to watch, what's going on with the food supply and microplastics. Well, if they are in plastics, rather in plants, we know that they're also in water, they're in honey, they're in beer, and you can bet that what's going into us is actually staying in us. This was a question as recently as maybe 3 or 4 years ago. The hope was, well, if we're ingesting it or we're breathing it, we're just passing it, right? Right? Unfortunately, that's not the case. This was a study from just last winter demonstrating that microplastics are on both sides of the human placenta. So the fetus contains microplastics at birth. Human blood has been found to have microplastics in it as of this March. And the same team that did this study also found microplastics in human breast milk, also in March. Aside from that being alarming, perhaps one of the most alarming parts of that study was that they surveyed women from all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of locations, and there was no background or location or diet or habit or lifestyle that protected women from having microplastics in breast milk. So it's that ubiquitous. So what does that mean? If it's in our blood, if it's in our milk, if it's in our bodies, what is going on? Well, we don't know yet is the first answer, but we have some guesses. The study of plastics in human health right now is about where oceans and plastics were about 15 years ago. We know it's there. We don't know exactly where, and we don't know what it does, but we have some guesses. We know that what happens in the animal models happens in the human models eventually. And from the animal models, we do know that it crosses the blood-brain barrier. We also know what plastic is made out of and what the chemicals in it are and what they do, but it's very difficult to show a direct link in a human being. So that's where the studies are right now, but they're very difficult. Here's though what we think it adds up to. So we'll take a step back. Plastics are made out of fossil fuels. Initially it was petroleum, now it's largely ethane gas. That's another story for another time. But when you use a fossil fuel to make a fork, you're going to have to add a lot of additives to make it have those properties. Now, the word plastic is actually, it's an adjective as well as a noun. So plastic is malleable. So any given object that is plastic is about 50% additives, chemical additives by molecular weight, and 50% plastic. So those chemicals are going to be, things that make it rigid, things that make it soft, things that give it color, things that protect it from UV rays, and in particular, if it is a fossil fuel, things that keep it from bursting into flame. So flame retardants, lots and lots of flame retardants. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it's not that great to be surrounded by flame retardants all the time, particularly if you're storing your food in them or eating off of them, which is what toxicologists are looking at. And the especially daunting thing about this is that many of these chemicals, including the flame retardants, are what's called endocrine disruptors. Well, endocrine disruptors pretend that they're hormones in the human body. They look just like hormones. So they trigger hormone responses. Now, for those of you who haven't been to biology class in too many years, hormones, they're lipid protein models. They travel around our bodies. They tell our cells what to do. They carry messages. They act like on and off switches. So estrogen, testosterone, human growth hormone. main hormones in our bodies. And when they're disrupted, they affect necessary systems all over the body. Endocrine disruptors can impact the hormones that regulate our appetite and our metabolism, causing obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, all of which are on the uptick. They can disrupt brain development, causing lower IQ, ADHD, autism spectrum disorders, all of which are on the uptick. And they can cause cancers, especially breast, prostate, and testicular cancers, all of which are on the uptick. So this is dark stuff. Let's move on. When I have more time, I usually try to throw in like pictures of bunnies and stuff to get people to relax a little. We don't have a lot of time, so let's just keep moving and move on to how to stop this as quickly as we can. The next thing to think about is the fact that climate change and plastic production are in fact intricately related. This is not just an issue of litter or of human health, or even just marine biology, The US plastic industry's greenhouse gas emissions are poised to surpass those of coal-fired power plants by 2030. The emissions involved in plastic are massive. If plastic were a country, it would be the world's 5th largest greenhouse gas emitter. And that's after other major players that we all know quite a lot about. Oops. These are the burden of all of this is not shared equally. Most of the factories, the refineries creating these plastics are in areas that are lower income and disproportionately people of color. Beyond Plastics report found that 90% of the emissions from plastic infrastructure and manufacturing is released into just 18 communities, mostly along the Texas and Louisiana coastlines, but increasingly Appalachia. And these communities earn 27% less on average than the median household income. They're 67% more likely to be communities of color. So this is a little scary, and even the petrochemical industry actually is starting to be frightened by the climate crisis itself and realizing that they cannot continue to go on blithely selling petrochemicals in the form of oil and gas. The markets are being disrupted. People are moving over to electric sources. So what are they going to do? Well, this is part of why we're seeing them get so bullish on plastic right now. There are other reasons, but the main one in some ways is because plastics are very literally the industry plan B. As we move to renewable fuels, they have realized that they can continue to sell petroleum products in the form of plastic because plastic doesn't have the same sort of emotional taint, certainly not the same environmental taint that emissions do. It's an interesting switch. We know that we can't recycle our way out of this problem. Aside from not being able to just stop buying oil and gas, can't just stop buying things from the supermarket, and we can't just recycle our way out of this. Again, that's a whole other lecture, but in effect, it's because the scope of the problem is just orders of magnitude bigger than any recycling system can possibly handle. And because there are many plastics, not just one or two. So many of those plastics actually have molecular structures that are very, very, very difficult to recycle if they were ever recyclable at all. The way to stop this crisis is actually pretty simple. To stop plastic pollution, we have to stop making plastic. And we have to get the political will to do that. Now, that's a heavy lift because this is $1 trillion industry and our cultural habits are ingrained on plastic. Like I said, you can't not use it. You can't avoid it. It's structural. So how are we going to achieve this? Well, at Beyond Plastics, we got a lot of ways. Our two most central messages are that meaningful change has to happen upstream at a structural level. We can't shop, boycott, or recycle our way out. The solution is going to be regulatory. And our other message is quite related. Your voice as a citizen and a person is exponentially louder than your voice as a consumer. So we need your voice, voting, but also just literally making noise. And it's not hard to get people to do that because a lot of people want to stop plastic pollution. There are no plastic pollution deniers. To learn about this problem is basically to be galvanized to take action around it. On our website, we have a model bill called the Plastic Trifecta, which is actually now the Plastics Quadrifecta because we added a 4th item. It bans plastic bags, polystyrene, straws, except upon request, and we added the intentional release of balloons, because these are all really simple things that can be done locally and are very much within reach of many municipalities. The idea here is that you're going to start with your own life and you're going to go up the ladder and eventually work at the state level or the federal level. Now, many of you may have heard of the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. This act was sort of it's not totally gone yet, I'll get there. This is kind of the omnibus bill for plastic pollution. Just a few of the things that it would do would be to ban certain single-use plastic products that are not recyclable, ban the carry-out bags, require producers to design and finance waste collection and recycling programs, create a nationwide beverage container refund program, and establish minimum recycled content requirements. Beyond Plastics joined hundreds of other organizations in support of this bill, but at the moment it's basically stalled. It had 120 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives and 9 in the Senate, but it had massive industry opposition. I can't imagine why, and it never moved out of committee. Its main sponsor in the House is retiring, so it'll need a new sponsor in January. What it did do that was amazing in the last year was it changed the narrative in Washington, D.C. about what's desirable and what's possible. And that is very important. So we're looking now to a new type of regulation, which is going at this point, we think, to be state by state until gradually we can make it work on the federal level. But this is extended producer responsibility, EPR, or as I say, you make it, you take it. And the fundamentals are that. The manufacturers are going to have to take responsibility for this product, which lasts and lasts and lasts. It's got to have an end plan. Of course, there are a few risks with pushing this, and one is the influence of industry itself. Because with laws like this, a weak bill could actually be worse than no bill. If the law says, oh, it's EPR and we've got it all covered, it winds up being a distraction. People hear it, they say, oh, that sounds great, and it's easy to greenwash these bills. So now to put a fine point on it, these are some of the company or some of the actors that are pushing for weak and ineffective EPR. The American Chemistry Council, when you see them pop up, always get worried. The recycling partnership sounds like such a great idea, but the people who sponsor the recycling partnership are these guys, none of whom are particularly interested in seeing less packaging. So if we do it, we have to get it right. And just in the last minute, I'll tell you a couple of the basic principles that we're really pushing hard here in order to get it right. What'll it take? Well, environmental standards for packaging. This makes sense for cars and for so many other items that consumers buy. These standards would say, okay, 50% reduction in packaging over 10 years. We're going to have to get there by using reuse, refill, redesign the products so they're either recyclable or reusable.
Megan, sorry to interrupt you. Another minute.
Okay, no problem. Reduce the toxins, take out the brominated flame retardants. If you recycle the toxics in, you get toxics out when you recycle them. No burning, don't burn it. There are a lot of words for burning: chemical recycling, hydrolysis. That's basically just turning plastic pollution into air pollution. And no, the filters do not work on those steps. Bottle bills. Container deposits are the rock stars of recycling. We get more recycling, cleaner recycling, and better recycling back with bottle bills than anything else. And this redistributes the wealth among the people who are most likely to be needing it, people who need to scavenge, who are looking to make an extra buck. Let's see, make the polluters pay for it. We don't have much control right now over what comes our way, but if packaging companies had to pay the cost of recycling, there would be a lot more control over what was coming out. Right now, the burden is on us, the taxpayers. That's called an externality. Do not leave the companies in charge. This would be like leaving the smoking companies in charge of banning smoking. We can imagine how that will go. When it does, these are the kinds of promises made and the kinds of execution done. So the red bars are reduction promised actually rather recently by major companies, and the blue bars are how they actually performed. So those are some basics. We hope that you will join us in our quest for good EPR and our quest for excellent legislative solutions. And I know that our other panelists today will have more local solutions to talk to you about and more things right on the ground, right where you are. So thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks a lot. Next up, we have Macy Zander. Macy is the Reuse Communities Policy and Engagement Officer at Upstream. She's thrilled to be a part of Upstream's mission to make throwaway go away through a prioritization of reuse in business, policy, and cultural innovation. In her role, she supports local coalitions working to promote reuse in their own communities. She has broad experience in the fields of environmental advocacy, issue campaigning, renewable energy development, and social science research. As an organizer and advocate, Macy worked across the country for national nonprofits on a number of issues, including climate change and plastic pollution. She holds a Master's of Science in Environmental Governance from the University of Freiburg in Germany, and a double Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science and Political Science from Texas Christian University. She lives in Austin, Texas.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Let me quickly share my screen with you all. And Megan, thank you very much for the excellent presentation. Oops. Great. Can you folks see my screen okay? Thumbs up. Okay, super. So yes, thank you very much, Megan. That was a great way to kick off today's conversation. Very glad to be here with you all today. As Seema said, my name is Macy Zander, and I am with Upstream. Upstream is a national nonprofit focused in the US and Canada, and we focus on upstream solutions to plastic pollution, which means that for us, that means transitioning away from the throwaway culture to a new way of thinking about how goods are delivered to consumers. We work to replace the disposability model with reuse and refill systems that offer safe, durable products that help to solve plastic pollution, toxic chemical exposure, climate change, and provide a just transition away from the extractive and polluting processes that harm fence-line communities. So I will first, to pick off where Megan left off, I'm going to kick us off with talking about some of the local policies that Upstream advocates, as well as some non-policy initiatives in case you're interested in getting something going in your own community. And then I'll dive into a little bit more about why we focus on reuse as a solution and give examples of reuse systems and entrepreneurs, including a few in Chicago. So I will start with a conversation about local policy work. One of our focuses as an organization is helping local leaders to advocate for policies that reduce waste and support reuse in their own communities. There are many standalone policies being enacted across North America that are driving reduce and reuse for specific types of products. For us, the first strategy is to reduce as much of the waste as possible. Many of these policies focus on banning single-use products, like Megan alluded to. Some are also pushing towards a reuse option, like plastic bag bans that drive a switch to reusables, and banning single-use water bottles, for instance, in government facilities, and putting in refill stations instead, such as pictured here. Another policy approach that focuses on reduction of single-use is accessories on request, or skip the stuff. Upstream launched the Skip the Stuff campaign in 2020 as a response to the pandemic and the excessive amount of unwanted and unnecessary utensils, straws, condiment packets, and other accessories people were getting with the big increase in takeout food ordering. Today, 56 Skip the Stuff style policies have been enacted in local jurisdictions, as well as 2 states in the US, California and Washington state, meaning that currently 11% of the US population should no longer be getting accessories they don't want or need. The second set of policy strategies that Upstream focuses on is transitioning to reuse systems. For food service providers like restaurants and cafes, that means policy mandates for reusable foodware for on-site dining. These policies have already been enacted in a number of US cities, starting with Berkeley in 2019 and quickly spreading along the West Coast and hopefully soon to other parts of the country as well. Some foodware ordinances in the US and Canada also now require that disposable cups and sometimes containers no longer be given out for free. The latte levy is the common term for this in Europe. This is catching on steadily throughout the US as well. So finally, reuse at government events and workplaces and in government procurement policies is another option for policies that can be pursued locally. Now, if passing local policy isn't possible where you live, or simply isn't your focus of what your group wants to work on, there are other initiatives that a community can take to promote reuse locally. So education and engagement of local restaurants and cafes is always recommended, regardless of what approach you decide to take. In addition to seeing if they can voluntarily implement accessories on request or reuse for on-site dining, you can ask them to make it visible to clients that they're allowed to do something called BYO, or bring your own cups, bring your own containers. This is something local advocates are doing across the country. For example, inspired by the Canada Reduces program, zero waste advocates in a number of US cities are asking restaurants to put up visible signage on their doors to alert customers that their own containers will be accepted. Another option to educate the community, engage volunteers, as well as gather data on local waste patterns and potentially set up the groundwork to support policy down the road is to organize something called a trash blitz or a brand audit, which is basically a litter cleanup, but one that focuses on calling out the corporations that are most responsible for the waste that we find. Our colleagues and friends at Five Gyres have a really great system in place for doing a trash blitz, which contributes to their national and international data set to show a broad picture of what type of waste is found throughout the world. Transitioning single-use systems to reusable doesn't have to happen via policy. Schools, highly visible venues like a zoo or aquarium, dining districts in your own community, or local events are all ways that we can implement reuse without needing government policy to mandate it. For example, working with local schools to implement reusable lunch trays, which I know is something that Seema is working on in her own community, is something that can be done without necessarily needing something to be passed by local government. So before I go any further, I want to spend a little bit of time focusing on why we think reuse is the solution here. The reality is, using products for just a few minutes before they become waste is not a sustainable form of consumption, especially for a population of almost 8 billion people. Disposable products harm the planet by every measure of environmental impact, from resource extraction to loss of biodiversity, to air and water pollution, to water consumption, greenhouse gas emissions, chemicals of concern, as well as harm associated with excessive waste. The reality is that the way the US is currently set up, we live very much in a throwaway economy. Currently, 10% of all the wood harvested, 20% of all the aluminum mined, 40% of all plastic generated, 50% of all glass produced is going into making single-use packaging, which is used once and either ends up in the landfill, recycled, and again, Megan brought up a lot of the problems with recycling that are important to be aware of, especially with plastics, or it ends up in our environment as pollution. We believe that the issue does go beyond single-use plastic and extends to all single-use materials. Each has a host of environmental and human health impacts, so we advocate for avoiding the switch to other single-use alternatives that simply shift around the impacts. In these ways, we view them as regrettable substitutes. And we do believe as an organization that the problem isn't so much, it is very much single-use plastic, but it's all forms of single use. So what exactly does a future even look like if we're talking about transitioning away from a single-use system towards a reusable system? I have a little visionary exercise here, so please humor me. And I'd like for you to think of a city of tomorrow. This can be a city that you currently live in, a city that you really enjoy visiting, but think about it a few years into the future. You may notice a future where all restaurants and cafes serve on real plates, use real cups, use real cutlery. Every single restaurant, including McDonald's, and this is actually a real photo from Germany, where there is a lot of requirement around reusables. And even in the United States here, Upstream's reusables for on-site dining was adopted in Berkeley, California. And so now all the fast food restaurants in Berkeley are having to serve their patrons on ceramics like this and reusable options. All to-go coffee is provided in returnable, reusable cups. Takeout and delivery is provided in reusable to-go containers that are easily returned. At public venues, water is provided in reusable waters. At sporting events or at concerts, everyone is drinking their beer, their soda out of real cups. And all the drinks come in refillable bottles. You can get groceries, cleaning supplies, personal care supplies, any kind of product delivered to your home in reusable containers. Or you can go to your local store and pick up the things you usually purchase in reusable containers. You have the option to send your reusable containers back via pickup. Or there could also be a future where you're able to put out your reusables just like you do your recycling, side by side. Or you can simply drop off your reusable containers at the store through a kiosk like this, or return it while you're out and about. And this is actually Vessel. This is their reverse vending machine. And I believe that this picture is from Boulder, Colorado. So the future of these reuse systems might seem just completely out of hand, but in reality, this future is closer than we think. For takeout food and beverages, a wide range of options are iterating in cities across North America, from reusable cups that you can borrow from a cafe and return at a curbside kiosk, to meals delivered in stainless steel containers that insulate and actually keep your meal hot by the time you get home to enjoy it, to meals vended in reusables and reusable container return systems and vending machines. The innovation is truly astounding, and new developments are coming online every single day. For takeout cups and containers, there are a few different models of service. Similar to a lending library, Vessel Cups in Boulder and Berkeley, which I mentioned earlier, offers a third-party provided cup that is actually free to the customer. The customer borrows the cup and returns it to a participating business. The costs are covered by the retail operator. The customer must download an app and provide a credit card information. And if the cup isn't returned within a specific period of time, the customer is charged for the cup. In a way, it's a little bit like a library fine if you don't return your book. The deposit system, on the other hand, involves the customer paying for an upfront deposit that is refunded when the cup is returned. This option is offered by a number of companies like Again Again in New Zealand, Recircle in a lot of Switzerland, and Recup and Rebowl in cities across Germany. Some systems offer a subscription service wherein the customer pays for the month or by the year for a reusable service. So Durham Green to Go, Bold Reuse in Portland, Oregon, Sparkle in the San Francisco Bay Area, Useful in Boston, and Muse in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Toronto all follow this type of model. And some companies, like Just Salad pictured here, sell you a reusable, and then they have the customer bring it back. And each time you bring it back, you get freebies on your future orders. And then other companies like Fresh Bowl, pictured here, use vending machines to sell reusable packaging and reverse vending in order to get their glass containers back. Reverse vending machines are utilized by other companies like Aussie, which can be found across the US, particularly on corporate campuses and university campuses. And then you have the category of bulk dispensing, which is not new if you've shopped at your local co-op. But essentially, there are some companies like Be Unpackaged, Good Holdings Company that are trying to add more levels of tech to this to make it an even more streamlined process. So the whole idea is to change the concept of how we view and treat packaging. The idea is not for us to view packaging as a product that is just going to be tossed and we have no idea where it's actually going to end up. The idea is to think of packaging as a service that is provided to us. So reuse systems in this country are being led by innovators that are showing us the way forward. So these are a few examples, and this list is by no means finite, just a few random examples, but of companies that are really paving the way forward. From the cafes that won't serve customers anymore in disposables, even for takeout. And examples of this are more common in Europe, such as the Boston Tea Party Coffee and Waitrose in London. But Blue Bottle Coffee in the San Francisco Bay Area is also running pilots on this and is hoping to expand further. You also have reusable takeout container services. So for example, Durham Green to Go, Bold Reuse, Sparkle, and Dispatch Goods as examples. You also have providers that focus on reuse at events. So Cup Concept, Enviro Cups, Green Goblet are all big companies doing this in Europe. You have another one called Gobelet in New Zealand and Australia that are operating at scale. And then in the US, you have Cup Zero based in New York City, and you have Our Cup that is looking to expand actually to quite a few cities nationally that are focusing on the reuse space within events. You also have meal and grocery delivery companies that are focusing on being able to deliver groceries to your home in reusable packaging. So examples of that in the US are Planted Table and Green Tiffin. And then, as I alluded to earlier, vending in bulk systems. So My Fresh Bowl offers the world's first throwaway-free vending machine. And again, this also includes Aussie Systems, which is popular on college campuses for collecting cups and containers. The exciting thing is there are a few companies that are already operating or organizations that are driving initiatives in the Chicago area. Foreverware is a Minnesota-based company, but they've expanded to Chicago recently, and they're currently in 4 cafes there and looking to expand further. They operate like a library system. They have 12 and 16-ounce stainless steel cups and offer businesses the ability to purchase a whole starting kit, including the signage, a checkout system, and a return system, and obviously as well the cups. Reuso is a Chicago-based company, and they work in more of the space of closed campuses, so corporate campuses, festivals, schools, universities, and airports. And they offer full and half-size clamshells, drink, and soup cups. And then I'm sure many of you are also aware that Shed Aquarium is leading a lot of work on this as well. They currently have a program called Let's Shed Plastic that works with restaurants to reduce single-use plastics in their operations. They provide learning opportunities for staff and patrons and collectively advocate for more sustainable policies and systems. In addition to restaurants, they're also working with policymakers, businesses, schools, scout groups, community leaders, and many others to tackle plastic pollution from every angle in the Chicago area. And if you're curious to see what restaurants they're partnering with, it is readily available on their website. If you'd like to learn more, because I know this was a lot of information, these are some resources that you can look at. Probably the top one that I would bring to your attention is we have a podcast. We just finished our 100th episode, and we interview every single week different leaders within the reuse space. And so, yeah, I hope you find value in that. And with that, that is a wrap for me. And I'll hand it back to you, Seema, for the next presenters.
Great. Thank you, Macy. Thanks for that vision and all of those examples, and to Megan for showing us why we need to bring change in our communities. So next we have Jen Walling. Jen Walling, as most of you know, she is the executive director for the Illinois Environmental Council since January of 2012, where she oversees the strategic direction and the management of the organization and lobbies decision makers on environmental issues. Jen is dedicated to building the power of Illinois environmental community to secure policy outcomes that protect the environment. Jen has drafted, negotiated, lobbied, and passed hundreds of bills in Springfield while working to build the power, expertise, and relationships of the entire environmental community. Jen holds a bachelor's and a master's degree in natural resources and environmental sciences from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She also received a Juris Doctorate from the University of Illinois College of Law and is an attorney licensed to practice law in Illinois. Jen, take it away.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I think we're kind of going in this momentum of negative to positive to negative. We dreamed about our world, and now I'm going to tell you about the Illinois General Assembly. I do have some slides, not many, and I'm not going to talk for as long, I hope, so that Jordan has more time. Cool. So I'm going to talk a bit about plastics. Springfield, our state capital, that's what I'm going to talk about in terms of state legislature. I'll say Springfield and your community, kicking off a little bit and went to you to what you can do, but Jordan's going to give some maybe more real examples. You seen this in presenter mode?
No.
Okay, it's showing right. Okay, cool.
No,
It's not showing right.
not showing
Oh,
right.
it's not showing right. Okay,
No.
that's awesome. I don't think I'm going to be able to change that. So let's just go to the next one. Because I have a screen attached that I need to remove. So just a little bit more about IEC. We've been around since 1975. And actually, let me try one more thing. And if I detach this, cool, okay, better. Illinois Environmental Council has been around since 1975. We have a lot of different member organizations. Any of the Go Green organizations, you are welcome to join. We do have a community council. We also have free memberships for affiliates, and we are your lobbyists. We work on your behalf in Springfield. We also have somebody who does federal work for Illinois. So lobbies are Illinois-based congressmen, and we do have a registered lobbyist at the city of Chicago. I know working on local campaigns is somewhere our board is thinking about in terms of strategic planning, but it'll depend on resources. But we're the folks that are helping build relationships with lawmakers and build that environmental majority in the state legislature. Yeah, so I'm gonna start, like, what everybody asks me about is a bottle bill, and I only have a couple slides on this. So bottle bills, great. Everybody likes them, I'm sure on this talk or in the environmental community. It is the thing I have been asked most about in the last 12 years in this position with the states that have them. There are huge rates of recycling. There could be a huge return in revenue in Illinois for unreturned bottles. Yeah, it's a great thing. It does a lot of recycling. It gets revenue for the state. But we've never passed one in Illinois. And I believe the last time that a bottle bill advanced out of committee in Illinois was in 1977, where it was then defeated on the floor. This is some info from then. And this is a picture of the last time the bottle bill was considered in Illinois and got a full hearing. That was a long time ago. It's been introduced a number of times. There's one in 2005 with a 5-cent deposit, etc. And that kind of takes us to where we're getting to a bit today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the plastics and waste bills that were put together just with a focus on the plastics one. And these are some of the ones that were proposed. And I will say, there have been a number of proposals throughout the years on plastic bills, and there have been, prior to this year even, some movement forward on plastics. We've done a bunch on personal container usage and health standards. We've done a bunch on different extended producer responsibility, but it is hard, and I'm going to get to the point of why it's hard, which is the stakeholders. So these were some of the bills put in. I'm just going to talk about the plastic ones, but we did have a polystyrene reduction bill that would have banned styrofoam. It did pass the House committee, but didn't get a full House vote. There also was a styrofoam-based product ban that banned the state from purchasing styrofoam. That one got out of the House and did not make it through the Senate. Carpet recycling has been, and this is extended producer responsibility model, has been under consideration for a long time. The Coalition for Plastic Reduction also worked on an omnibus plastic reduction bill that would have included a ban on plastic bags, single-use plastic by request only, and a bunch of other plastic reduction measures, including bans at the State Fair and Department of Natural Resources. There also were two different container deposit bills introduced this year, one that was from the environmental community and one that was actually put in by the Can Manufacturing Institute. So there's a lot of pressure right now on these things to succeed, and making sure that we get the right one that I am going to have to say isn't too industry driven is going to be where we're going to head. So just a couple of things that we did pass this year that were exciting. One of them, and this is not plastics, but well, actually, let me start with the plastic one at the bottom. We did, through Senator Julie Morrison, who represents a lot of like Highland Park and Lake County and all of that. She put in a bill that creates a preference for compostable or recyclable foodware in purchasing, and bans single-use plastic from Illinois state parks and natural areas. So the ban on single-use plastics at state parks starts January 1st, 2023 from DNR itself, and then for vendors, January 1st, 2024. I do think there's a really great opportunity here to be working with DNR and working with vendors on what those guidelines look like, so that we're heading more towards reusables in what DNR is using. I mean, there are some state park vendors you will go to. I have been all over the state to lots and lots of state parks, and there are some state park vendors that entirely still just give you styrofoam and don't have anything reusable at the place where they're doing work. So making sure that we're creating that is going to be really important, but that was great to pass. I will point to this top one here, which is the drug take back bill. This one took us 3 years to pass, and it is a bill that requires pharmaceutical companies to pay for the safe disposal of prescription drugs. Like, why am I talking about that on a plastic thing? Well, part of how this bill passed is that the organization that represents the retailers, the Retail Merchants Association and IEC, teamed up together and said, we're going to work together to defeat the pharmaceutical companies. And, we did just that. It was really a winning combination to eventually make the pharmaceutical companies bend and have to agree to the proposal that we put forward. And not all of them agreed to it, but a lot of them did. And that was the way that we were able to pass it and get millions of dollars for prescription drug disposal. Hopefully, as we see it go into effect, we may need to alter it in future years, but it was a really great thing to get on the books to get that funding. And so that's a partnership I want you to think about as we're going into the rest here. And so some of the things that are under consideration for 2022 definitely are more of these plastic reduction bills. There are a lot of discussions about extended producer responsibility bills that mirror what's been under discussion in Colorado, New York, California, Maine. Representative D'Avelar from Joliet area put in a bill that is just like Maine. And so there is some big work being done here, but from IEC's perspective, and we are really late on our comments with it, we have a lot of concerns about equity and making sure that, the General Irons of Chicago, which was a recycling facility that we fought, don't happen again, and that we're looking at equity, and that communities that have been underserved are getting what they need to get. So that's going to be important. I think there actually is, like, you know, I talked about it's been since 1977, but I do think there are some things that maybe just looking at the bottle bill instead of extended producer responsibility might be where some stakeholders are at. And of course, toxics in packaging is a big deal. So PFAS or other things that might be out there. These are just concepts that are under consideration. And I know Coalition for Plastic Reduction working on the goals that we want to achieve. But I do think we know that the goals that we want to achieve are not just simply funding the recycling system in Illinois more. That's not going to be the effective thing that we want to do. We need to incentivize using less plastic in the first place, not creating the waste in the first place, so that, you know, we don't need to recycle it. But, you know, our end product is not going to be a better funded recycling system. And that's where some stakeholders are at. And I put some of that here just for some understanding. The environmental community, this is definitely a top priority. For environmental justice organizations and communities, they're looking at where recycling facilities may end up being located. And of course, a lot of these end up in environmental justice communities. So if any part of the solution supported is recycling, that's a problem. We do have one piloted allowed chemical plastic recycling facility in Will County in Illinois. And that's in a community that already has a lot of pollution. You know, so how do we deal with that? And then, you know, county and municipal government recycling agencies are definitely a stakeholder. A lot of them are definitely looking for more funding, especially as certain counties see their landfill tipping fee decline. And then the retailers are interested because any taxes or fees that may happen to food products, for example, the way it's administered affects them, the way it's collected affects them. Labor is going to be an interest here. The Teamsters have been one of the biggest opponents to the bottle bill, and Teamsters are the folks that drive the trucks. And they have been an opponent. And then manufacturers, so the folks that are manufacturing the products are going to be an opponent, and probably not one that we can bring on board. So I will just say in all of this and showing you the stakeholders, I think that in Illinois, if we're going to see something robust, we're going to need a number of these stakeholders on board, even if they're folks that don't necessarily align with our end goals, because we don't have a majority of the General Assembly. And, you know, this is stuff that we've done through the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, which, you know, was kind of a almost 2007 to 2021 campaign. So, you know, almost 15 years to pass CEJA through all of the different iterations of renewables. And so how do we do this quicker? Illinois likes to do incremental things. So I don't see us biting off all of it at one time, but we'll see. But, you know, educating lawmakers on this issue so that they do the right thing is important. And I know we're working on what could be a winning strategy and how we could take steps, or do we just continue to build the movement and let other states pass things? And I will say, you know, some of the things here, I think Jordan's going to talk more about Chicago, but we did attempt to do a Chicago plastics-free water ordinance. But I think if it had not been for the pandemic, we would have really moved forward on it. And this included a lot of our desired things like reusable plates. This is from Friends of the Chicago River, this summary, banning styrofoam, you know, educating the public, allowing consumers to bring their own cups. So all of these sorts of things, single-use plastic by request only, which is something lots of municipalities should think about, because that one is an interesting one. But then, of course, in Chicago, there was an alderman that was our friend. It was a weird item that went ahead and banned restaurants from giving away single-use plastics, but without requests. So this is a lot of delivery and that sort of stuff, but it has absolutely no enforcement. So it's not one where nobody's enforcing it. Like literally the law is written that there are no consequences for violating the law. And that's why the restaurants and the plastic manufacturers liked it so much. So that was really disappointing, but we may be looking to where we can get in Chicago. I'll leave some of that to Jordan. I put, some of what some municipalities have done, and I may not be totally correct on some of these, but there are not a lot of Illinois municipalities that have passed a bag ban or a tax. Only home rule municipalities, well, I'm not your lawyer, talk to your municipal lawyer, but I believe that only home rule municipalities can do a ban or tax on plastic bags. So that leaves about a third of the residents of the state unable to do something. But I would just, in any of this, consider what your municipality can do. What ordinance can you copy? And, I will tell you at this point, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Let's get stuff on the books. Like, this is stuff that there's a bill in Springfield that we didn't pass 12 years ago because apparently hundreds of municipalities were going to pass bag bans, taxes, and fees. This is my last slide tonight.
Okay.
So I'm ending now. So see what you can do. But thank you so much, and I'll pitch it back over.
Great. Thank you, Jen. Thank you for that legislative landscape. That was really great. Next up, we have Jordan Parker. Jordan became a grassroots environmental activist in her late 30s when she became interested in the issue of single-use plastic bags, what she now calls a gateway issue. That can be one of the first steps people take in changing their individual behavior from passive to participating in solutions to our environmental problems. After 5 years of work, her campaign, Bring Your Bag Chicago, was instrumental in passing the Chicago checkout bag tax that went into effect in 2017. The same year, she founded Trevani Institute, a nonprofit that supports environmental grassroots campaigns, projects, and events that have intersectional elements of physical and/or mental health. Our goal is to create paying jobs for grassroots activists throughout the country who are doing critical work that has historically been undervalued and unpaid within our capitalist system. She graduated from the University of Minnesota with a degree in sociology and filmmaking. When she's not working, you can find her writing, biking around Chicago, spending time with her 2 dogs, and playing way too much chess online. Take it away, Jordan.
Thank you. And thank you to all of the speakers who came before me. This is really inspiring. I'm going to bring this up a little bit back to a positive note. What I want to do is invite everybody here on this call and everyone you know to join the Coalition for Plastic Reduction. This is a statewide group of environmental organizations, or enviros, grassroots organizations, and individuals who just care about this issue. And to what Jen said about the uphill battle in Springfield, one really positive thing we have going on in Illinois is that we can pass legislation. About 10 years ago, ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, they're a front group for industry. And they go around and they lobby Republican lawmakers to pass what is called preemption bills. And preemption bills are pieces of statewide legislation that basically muzzle the entire state, like they prevent the entire state from passing any legislation that regulates plastic. So ironically, they want less regulation, and the way they go about that is they regulate the entire state. So here in Chicago, the mother of the environmental justice movement, Hazel Johnson, she's from Altgeld Gardens, and she coined the term the toxic donut. That's industry that was surrounding her community and what encouraged her to get into environmental justice. So what we have here in Illinois is a toxic donut around a state of other states that have preemption bills. So Michigan can't regulate plastics, Indiana can't regulate plastics, Wisconsin can't regulate plastics. It goes, I think there are 6 states surrounding our state. So this is amazing that here in Illinois, we can pass legislation. So a little brief history about CPR. 10 years ago, there was a preemption bill that had made it through both the House and the Senate and was on Governor Quinn's desk. And some of you might remember activist Abby. She was a girl from Grayslake, and she put together a change.org petition. She was like the epitome of a grassroots activist. She was saying, we want to regulate plastics here. I want to be able to pass a bag ban in my community if I want to. So she lobbied and she rallied all of this support, and Governor Quinn vetoed it. And that was in 2012. So around that time, Jen Walling had just started with IEC, and she put together a plastics listserv of people throughout the state who were really interested in plastics. And I believe that Jen fought off this impending preemption bill for like 8 years or something like that. So, that was and is a huge accomplishment. And throughout that time, we were having conference calls talking about the preemption bill, but also other plastics issues. And that was in the days we had conference calls. Do you guys remember conference calls where you would dial in and you press a code and pound and announce your name? So we would do that, and we had conference calls. And then in early 2021, the Coalition for Plastic Reduction was born out of that group. And it was founded by a group of major enviros like IEC, Environment Illinois, Illinois PIRG, Friends of the Chicago River, Shed Aquarium, and it was coalescing around the Plastic Free Waters Ordinance that was introduced here in Chicago right before the pandemic in January 2020. So in 2021, the Coalition for Plastic Reduction was formed. So we're very, very young, but the power here that we have to create synergy between enviros and grassroots individuals and grassroots organizations is huge. So what we do, we meet once a month on the third Wednesday of the month at 4 p.m. on Zoom. And we talk about legislation, we talk about local issues. It's a place for everyone to come together who's interested in this issue, and talk about, like, you know, what are we going to work on in Springfield this legislative session? What's going on in our local communities? And it is grassroots. Like, grassroots work is, you know, it's creating something from scratch, right? It's kind of, you are kind of creating the wheel. You're inventing the wheel when you do grassroots work. It's exciting, it's interesting, it's messy, it's frustrating, but that's what we're doing. And we're bringing all of these people together to work on legislation and also local pieces of legislation, and also just movements, just building the movement. So the other thing that we do is, because we bring together people who are all interested in this issue and all working on different things, we are preventing people from reinventing the wheel. So for example, if somebody in Naperville wants to work on a bag ban or a bags fee or tax, they can connect with people like myself who has been through that in Chicago already. We passed a failed bag ban that my campaign campaigned against. We repealed that, we replaced it with a tax, and now I'm launching Bring Your Bag Chicago 2.0 to get rid of plastic bags entirely. So just a really personal story as well about the power of this group is, you know, it's like I said, it's a young group, and throughout the pandemic, for the first year and a half of the pandemic, I was feeling pretty hopeless because we had, you know, we just entered this pandemic. None of us had seen anything like it before. And not only are we facing the stress of the pandemic, but we're facing a tsunami of disposable plastic. It was like this renaissance. Everything, like our Chicago bag tax was temporarily suspended. Everything was in a disposable. It was just, I was feeling pretty hopeless because I was watching a lot of news and I was just watching what was going on. So about a year and a half into the pandemic, when this thing happened with Nugent, the older woman here who passed a watered down version of the plastic-free waters ordinance that was just greenwashing, and it was supported by the Illinois Restaurants Association. It was basically just to make everybody feel good about themselves and kill something that actually was going to do something for the environment. So around that time, that was a year ago, a couple people from the Coalition for Plastic Reduction reached out to me. Claudia Jackson and Debbie Halpern from the League of Women Voters. They sent me an email and they said, we're interested in your work on plastics. We'd like to get together with you for coffee. So I met them for coffee. And it really lit something back up in me when I got together with these two women who I had met through these calls that I was on every month. And we talked all about plastics. It was, very therapeutic to talk to other people who are your people in a time like this, where there is just so much despair and there's so much grief about the loss that's happening around us every day. And then from that conversation, I started to re-engage. Throughout the pandemic, like I said, I was playing a ton of chess online and like growing my own mushrooms in my home and cooking and like watching news and feeling really depressed. And then I re-engaged because of these two women who reached out to me because we were all in the Coalition for Plastic Reduction. And that started this pretty amazing year in my life that I've had so far. I took my nonprofit Triveni Institute. I made it my full-time job. I started doing that in November. 6 months after I met with Claudia and Debbie, I started the Chicago Coalition for Plastic Reduction, which is a subsidiary of the statewide CPR. And in the future, this is a vision that I have, that all of us have who are currently in CPR, that there will be branches. There will be a Naperville CPR or a Western Suburbs CPR or a North Shore CPR or a Springfield CPR. And we will all be doing local work in our communities, because that is the #1 way to deal with climate grief and this despair about all of the loss, is to take local action where you live. Do something small, connect with people, and get it done. So
Jordan, we
I
have
started
one
CPR.
more.
Yep.
Sorry, we have 1 more minute, Jordan.
So I started CPR in Chicago, and we have now been meeting for 6 months. We're working on some local things like Bring Your Bag Chicago 2.0. Some of our members want to work on a balloon release campaign. We're supporting the Department of Environment and trying to get that back in Chicago. And it's election season, so we're doing some work with incumbent older people and people who are running against them. So I formed that group 6 months in, and now CPR, the statewide group, is also going to the next level in their organization as well. And Claudia Jackson has played a huge role, as well as all the people on the steering committee. So I just wanted to say to everyone, please join CPR. This is really overwhelming, this issue, but you are going to find like-minded people there. You're going to find your people, and you're going to be able to do something about this issue. We need you. We really, really need everyone here to engage. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Jordan, for that view on CPR. And before I actually go into the Q&A, and if I don't get a chance, I just want to say to Megan, Macy, Jen, Jordan, thank you for being here today. Thank you for your presentations, and also thank you for your dedication and hard work. I've worked with all of you in the past year, and I cannot tell you how much my group and myself have gained from your work. Before we go into Q&A, I just want to ask if Chris Murphy is still on the call, would you be able to spend a couple of minutes talking about the Bring Your Own BYO campaign by the Climate Reality Project?
Hey everyone. Yes, I'm still on the call. So Climate Reality Chicago is the Suburban Climate Action Planning team and the Zero Waste team are having a little Bring Your Own campaign. I posted the flyer in the chat. You're welcome to use it. We'll probably update it. If you have any comments or questions, you can reach out. But basically, we're just trying to make people aware, restaurants, farmers markets, kids' schools, anywhere, just that, you can bring your own container. It's not against the health department code. There are cross-contamination practices that have to be implemented, but, just making people aware that, you can bring your own cup for soda instead of getting like the styrofoam or plastic cup that can't be recycled. And we appreciate if you pass it out or share it at restaurants or green fests or whatever you'd like to do. Yeah, if you'd like to participate with us, we'd be happy to participate with you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And Seema, thank you for putting this program together. I want to thank Megan and Macy, Ben and Jordan for your excellent presentations. I will pull the questions out of the chat just to make this go smoother. And then Seema, you can help direct them to the right person. But I just want to ask people, we're going to go right from the Q&A into our community sharing portion. So any communities that want to report, please type your community name or community group name into the chat so that then we know who is actually here. So somebody asked, Jen, why labor opposes these bills?
I mean, in general, groups want to sell more stuff. And when it comes to, especially, the Teamsters and bottle items, even with, like, for example, the Cook County sugary beverage tax, which had its own problems. And, even when you look at the Cook County sugary beverage tax, it was much higher than a bottle deposit would be on most single-use beverages. And, raising the cost of something means people buy less. And so that's often why labor has opposed it. I know that doesn't, you could argue back with that, but that is the reason that they put forward in terms of their opposition. And labor opposing any of this is a really big deal. I think that if the retail merchants or the manufacturers did not agree, labor might be neutral on something and it could be winnable.
Thank you. I know it's discouraging. And I just want to add one thing to, Jen had talked about local municipalities being able to pass things. Definitely reach out to your local elected officials, to your city council members, village trustees, but don't reach out only to the person who is the environmentalist on that board, because you need more than one vote. So like in Highland Park, everyone calls me when there's anything environmental, but they need to call at least 3 of my colleagues in order to make things happen. So be sure to reach out, not just to the people who you know are friendly already to your issue. Okay, Jacqueline asked for Macy, can you speak to the trade-off of the energy and water used for washing and sanitizing the dishes, et cetera, versus single use, especially at the scale we're talking about?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And we have a very comprehensive report that focuses on the life cycle assessment of all these different materials and how they compare. And the key for reusables to make sense ecologically is for them to hit something called their break-even point. So if we start making a ton of stainless steel cups and they get used 4 times, that is not a win ecologically. They need to actually be put into proper reuse. And so that report breaks down essentially what materials need to be used what number of times for there to be a break even with single use items. So I have plugged it in the chat, but I'm happy to copy it in again. So I hope that that feels responsive to your question.
Thank you. I think that that definitely is responsive to the question. I mean, I'm not the question asker, but I know, yep, I'm getting thumbs up from Jacqueline. I know that that has been a topic of conversation here where we have a bag share program at our farmers market. I think we stole it from one of the other groups where we bring reusable bags. We gather them through the free box page on Facebook, and we have a bin at our farmers market. People can take a bag. And there's been a debate back and forth with our group about whether we should be purchasing Go Green Highland Park bags or whether to keep taking bags from people who have extras. And we've come out strongly on taking bags from the people who have extras so that we don't have to produce more. Because
Always.
Tracy asked, what is the best strategy when local school districts are resistant to changing over to reusables? Does anybody have a response?
It sounds like it's more, if I read the question, it's more about like labor shortages, monetary issues, or some combination of the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is, and someone already mentioned this in the chat, but there are grants available in terms of monetary assistance. So plastic-free restaurants, if you can switch single-use plastic items to reusables, they are being very generous with their grants with restaurants. And I believe that they're also extending now to schools nationwide. So I would check out that as an option. And I will drop my email in as well. We have some partners we work with frequently who focus on schools and especially plastics and the harm on children. So I'd be happy to foster some connections there. They would be able to point you to a more detailed direction.
A related question from Shital is, how do you educate and incentivize businesses and restaurants to minimize single-use plastic? Are there any educational materials?
Is that for restaurants, Kim, the question? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think Megan just posted on the chat as well. Megan, if you want to talk about this amazing webinar that you're doing this evening.
Sure. Yeah, actually, since you asked, Beyond Plastics just published a guide on how to work with restaurants to get them to reduce single-use plastic. And as soon as we published the guide, I was the author. I started hearing back from people in 2 categories: volunteers who wanted to use it but were unsure of how to approach restaurants, and groups who were already working with restaurants but who wanted to expand their footprint. So tonight, I'm just going to share my screen really quick. We're going to solve one problem with another this evening at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And we're having one of the volunteers from a community group who's been trying to work with restaurants, along with Grace Lee, who's the program director for Rethink Disposables, to talk about how to use this guide with restaurants, what to say, what not to say, what great approaches are or are not. And there'll be plenty of Q&A, I think, in there too. Sorry, my cat is being very affectionate here. So come on out. I put the registration link in the chat, and feel free to take a look at the guide, because it does go over pretty comprehensively, what are good reusable options, and in particular, the question of compostables and bioplastics, why those are or are not a good option, and how to order things. And yes, the Beyond Plastics webinar will be recorded.
Great. Now, Lori asked, where does the medical field stand on plastic pollution? I don't know if anybody has an answer to that. I know they use a lot of single-use disposables in the medical.
I actually have an answer to that. I've been looking into that question. I've been working with the Minderoo Foundation on a commission that formulated from Monaco on plastics and human health. And a number of the people there are physicians, and we're looking at the impact of medical plastics. Medical plastics are only about 4% of all of the single-use plastics that are out there. So it is a lot, but it's not very much of the problem. And they're usually used as a defense mechanism by industry to say, no, we have to have single-use plastics because medicine. Without single-use plastics, everyone will die. So it's, it's a way to deflect energy. For the most part, the place that in medicine one could reduce plastics very easily is the overwrapping of emergency room materials and other materials that don't need to be in several sleeves and several papers and that sort of thing. There are significant questions about going back to or utilizing autoclaves and other sanitizing methods. The chemical impact and the energy impact and the toxic impact of those might actually be higher than the plastics themselves. We don't know. One of the questions that's going on in medicine in the people who are thinking about this is the stricture of do no harm, because medical plastics do definitely they're an immediate conduit into the human body. So if you have anything like a stent or an IV line, you are immediately in contact, blood to blood contact with plastic. There is a question of whether the chemicals there are doing more harm in some patients than the illness that they're being treated. But that's a pretty wide open and philosophical question at this point. It's kind of a head scratcher.
Okay, on that happy note, I want to point out that SEMA worked with Go Green Highland Park and I believe Barrington and several others to produce a farmers market plastic reduction toolkit that is available on the Go Green Highland Park website. I think it's available on the Go Green Illinois website as well. There's a link in the chat from Jenny to the Highland Park, like the website. So we've got to switch over to community sharing, but thank you so much to SEMA speakers for participating. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, great job, SEMA, and thank you to all of our speakers. We have lots of communities on, but I haven't seen too many of you put your community name in the chat. You won't get called on unless your name is in the chat. So let's start with Arlington Heights, because they did say they had a quick report to make.
Hi, I'm David. Melanie had to step away, but wanted to let you know.
Okay, bye.
A sustainable yard tour this Sunday from
That was me. Sorry.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'll repeat that quickly. We're doing a sustainable yard tour this Sunday with Go Green Arlington Heights. And you're all invited. It's from noon to 3 p.m. We hope, particularly, of course, if you know folks in the Arlington Heights area or nearby, encourage them. We have a Facebook link at Go Green Arlington Heights, and the Facebook group is probably the easiest way to get in touch. And thank you. We've been inspired particularly by the Wilmette tours we've taken, but this is our first big event, so we hope to get lots of good feedback also as how to proceed and get ourselves on that Go Green map. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Feel free to post that to the Go Green Illinois website as well.
I think I've just got it on the calendar. I hope it worked. Thanks.
Okay.
There's a report in here from Sharon from the Sierra Club Woods and Wetlands group that they've created a plastics team, and she's got the link in the chat to the work that they've been doing with local restaurants.
Okay, there's a lot of really good information in the chat. That also will go onto the Go Green Illinois website, Kim, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, the chat will go onto the Go Green Illinois website. But if somebody has an event or wants to post some more detailed information, they should go on to the Go Green Illinois website, gogreenillinois.org. There's a post an event button on the top, as well as a post or submit a post link. And so you can click on either of those and write something up. If someone wants to write something about one of these great programs with some links in it, I'm happy to post it. I just don't have time to write all the posts myself. I believe Glenview said that they had a report about their solar tour.
Kim, I have the printout right in front of me. So
Okay.
let's just, we don't have anyone from Barrington, Brookfield, Chicago who asked to give a report. Sign in if you do. Deerfield and Des Plaines, no one put their names in. Type your names in.
Well, I see Debbie here. Debbie, do you have anything? Okay, keep going.
Okay, Evanston. I know we have Glen Ellen. Evanston, if you want to put a report, put your name in the chat. Let's go to Glen Ellen, please.
Hi, just a couple updates. We are participating in the Illinois Solar Tour. We have at least 4 homes. I think we might get up to 6, which is really exciting since I think last year we had 0. So big improvement. And then we're working on an Oaktober week for the village of Glen Ellen. We're coordinating this with the Environmental Commission, as well as the Park District and the library. So we have a bunch of different programming for different audiences that's going to highlight the importance of oaks, especially as a native species in Illinois. And the week is ending with an Oaktoberfest celebration at one of our parks. The goal is to get an audience that's not necessarily interested in nature, but they're going to have a good time and learn a few things and take that home with them. So we're having they can do a love letter to a tree. They can take a short nature walk. We're going to have some light recycling education, but we're also going to have paddle tennis demos. And best of all, a local brewery is making an Oaktoberfest beer for us to have. And we're going to have an Oaktober beer garden. So I'm really excited about that event. It's on October 8th and it's open to the entire community.
That sounds great. Glen Ellen is only what, 1 year old at this point?
Yeah, we're about to celebrate our first birthday.
Yeah, so you guys are really showing how quickly you can get up and running. Okay, I didn't see Glencoe or Glenview listed as giving a report. Type in if you would like.
Yeah, Beth.
Okay.
Sherry. Yeah,
Sherry.
from Glenview.
Okay, great.
Greener Glenview is partnering Greener Glenview is partnering with Go Green Northbrook for the Glenbrook Solar Tour, similar to our high school, Glenbrook North and Glenbrook South. And actually, the Village of Glenview's GIS people are putting together a map of both community spots. There's more than 20 host sites. And actually, I see Bernadette Knight is on the call, who's really been more involved in this than I am. So Bernadette, you probably want to add more detail. That's all I have.
Okay, did Bernadette want to add anything?
Yeah, I'm outside, so it's hard for me to speak. But yeah, we have put a lot of effort into it, but really appreciate that over 20 homeowners in our 2 villages will be able to, speak to their neighbours and community members about going solar and their solar journey. I must have spoken to over 20 people. Not one of them regrets going solar. Hello. So that's a big plus.
Okay, 20 houses on the solar tour is amazing, you guys. That's incredible. Glenview's working with what other community?
Glenview and Northbrook. And I was going to say the Illinois Solar Energy Association's their mini sustainable house is going to be at Apt Electronics in their parking lot, along with a description of all of the solar panels that are on Apt's roof. And after the solar tour, sometime in either October or November, we're going to be offering, Apt has agreed to give us a tour of their facilities because they do a lot of green, they work on a lot of green issues, but in particular, their solar panels on top of their warehouse. So they're going to be giving us a tour.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you very much. You guys are doing great. Go Greener Glenview is even younger than Go Green Glen Ellen. You guys are doing wonderful things. Highland Park, quick report.
Beth is borrowing my husband to do a show for Go Green Wilmette, next week, I believe.
21st, Wednesday, the 21st. It's a webinar called Addressing Climate Change at Home. And Jenny's husband, Jay, does a fantastic job. You could register for it on the Go Green Wilmette website.
Yes. And then we have solar tour here going as well. I think we have 9 communities houses signed up. We have some solar panels on our tennis center that hopefully we are getting someone to table at, and he'll be talking about community solar as well. So we are trying to get community solar on the solar tour as well. We're also doing something with the realtor in October, similar to, conservation at home, and this and that.
Great.
And
Awesome.
Copying Go Green Wilmette, and we're going to be sending out letters to new homeowners in Highland Park, welcoming them and telling them about Go Green. And one sort of question for the group, in case anyone has any ideas, they can email or send a chat. Highland Park just purchased yesterday on our council meeting 2 new vehicles to replace 20-year-old tractors and front loaders. The old equipment is very inefficient. The new equipment is much more efficient. However, we don't really get the benefit of the increased efficiency if we just resell the old equipment to somebody else to use. So we were looking for whether there were any grants available or any sorts of programs where we could actually retire the old equipment. So if anybody has ideas on that or comes across anything, can you please send me a note?
That's a problem for a lot of things, like, if you get a clean lawnmower, does it make sense to sell your old dirty one to somebody else, or even to give it to continue being used? That's a tough issue. Okay, I don't see that. Oh, wait, did LaGrange want to speak? If not, Lake Forest, Lake Zurich, Libertyville, put your names in and if you have a report, Lincolnwood, Morton Grove, Mundelein, Naperville, Northbrook, I know wanted to speak.
Sure. So Bernadette just gave an update on our solar tour. So we have a lot of exciting events coming up for the rest of the year. So, and we have been working very actively with the Sustainability Commission, with our village officials. So it's going in the right direction in Northbrook. Progress is slow, but we understand that it's going to take some time. So on October 19th, we actually have a Recycle Right panel scheduled at the Northbrook Public Library. I can, share a link to it with, anyone who wants to sign up online. I believe the number of signups, there's 500 people that can attend. So, if anyone from other communities want to sign up, they are interested. So tomorrow we are going to table at the farmers market. And one of the key goals we are working on right now is to really improve the recycling outcomes in our city itself. So that's going to be one of our focus areas for tabling. We also have a field tour to an MRF next week, if anyone wants to join that one with us. And the other thing which we are really working on is with the chamber, we are working on a green investing series. So, the first one of that is going to be in November. And really the goal for 2023, one of the, goals that our board member wants to do is to put out a speaker series, like an expert speaker series. So, educate our, the village, maybe the chamber, restaurants, schools. So I would love to invite some people who presented here today, if they are available, we would love to have some of them talk, because I think what we have seen is more effective is rather than us doing the talking, if we invite a specialist or, someone who's known in the field to talk. So that's all from Northbrook's end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so then Oak Park, I know, had something. And I'll call on you two. Why don't you go ahead and go now, okay?
Oak Park, we just passed a sustainability plan, our village board of trustees did. It's called Climate Ready Oak Park. And what I'll be doing is gathering organizations across the community to get the word out about it. That's going to be my job. But also just within our village, if anybody has interest, I haven't done this work, but we're trying to get a phase out gas powered blowers. We're trying to get our village to agree to that all new construction would have no gas lines to them. It would be only electric. And we also just made the village just made available compost to apartments. That there's like 5 pickup areas in the village that apartment dwellers can bring their compost to.
Great. Okay. How about Dorp from Friends of the Green Bay Trail?
Hi, thank you. We have a couple things going on, like Chantal was talking about. We've partnered with the Glencoe Library that so we can offer professionals and people in the field to give lectures, and we've got one coming up this week on Thursday, and it's the program on the monarchs. We're responding to the news that the monarchs have been put on the endangered list, and we've got a speaker for that. And then at the end of the month, on the 28th, we're partnering with Go Green Wilmette, and we're offering living green infrastructure projects from around the world, which is basically sharing what you can do and how you can support your municipality and things that they can do to help the environment. And we're also having a photo contest on the Green Bay Trail, and all of that is on gbtrail.org, or you can check out the Glencoe Library's listing as well. Thank you.
Great. I also want to add that the Glen Community Garden, which is right along the trail, has a new exhibit called the Power. It's all about climate change, and it's called powertower.org. If you go to that website, they guided tours of it, and it's really terrific. And they are looking for ways to get groups in to see it. So that is right along the trail in Glencoe. All right. So Park Ridge, Riverwoods, or Skokie.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is Linda from Park Ridge. I don't know if anybody else from Park Ridge is on, but I'm a member of the Go Green Park Ridge, and we do have a free Park Ridge Solar Walk Tour on Saturday, September 24th, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And I put the website for Go Green Park Ridge.org and solarparkridge@gmail.com. So if people want to find information out about it. But we have 14 homes.
Wow. That's fantastic. Just for you who don't know, the Illinois Solar Energy Association wanted to partner with communities because they found that they could get more homes on the tour if they were working with a local group. And so, wow, those of you who took that suggestion and are putting together tours, that's great. If your community does not have your own tour, please be sure to go to the ISEA, Illinois Solar Energy Association, and direct your people to go to their big statewide tour or to go to your nearby communities to see local solar. Okay, Vernon Hills.
Hey, Beth. So we, since 2019, we've been trying to convince our district and our superintendent to launch commercial composting at the schools. So finally, yes, last week and this week, we launched commercial composting in 2 of our 3 school districts. In one of the schools, which is our elementary school, upper elementary school, we had about 100 pounds of food waste in just one day. And we're estimating that that would be like about 20,000 pounds, if that continues, about 20,000 pounds of food waste diverted in a year. which is great, but not so great because that's a lot of food waste. And so one of the things that, we're already started talking about is what do we do to reduce the amount of food waste and get more focus on reduce. We partnered with 7 Generations Ahead to do that in our schools, and it was great, very smooth, and I highly recommend getting in touch with them and implementing it in your school districts. The second update I have is, I don't know, John, do you think you'd be able to give an update on the discussion that we're going to have this week about gas-powered leaf blowers?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry, wrong John.
Yeah.
Hi, John.
We're going to be doing we're going to be filming. Oh, there's John Petrillo. Awesome. We're going to be filming an interview about gas-powered leaf blowers and leaf management options for the fall. So to educate the public on things that they can do that is alternative to using gas-powered leaf blowers, with the hope that ultimately gas-powered leaf blower use will be reduced. So that's pretty much it.
Beth, we have John Petrillo here, who's our assistant village manager, and we've had discussions with him several times about gas-powered leaf blowers. So this is, we're working this year in terms of education. I don't know, John, if you wanted to add anything else.
Well, first of all, I'll say I'm very proud, speaking on behalf of the manager's office. We have great residents in our community, people like Seema and John, who aren't afraid to step up and I would say challenge not only the community, but staff to partner with many of these initiatives. And for the last 3 years, I've had the pleasure of doing exactly what I did today, sitting and listening. And I commend everybody who, takes these initiatives to their communities and their boards to push. As John mentioned, this Thursday, we have the opportunity to use our communications team, which consists of a cable channel and an electronic magazine that we call the Village Voice. And John is going to be working with our staff to produce content on issues that are important to us. And so once we get that content, we can do what this group is doing right here. We can push it out and share it with our community. So I look forward to continuing this partnership and relationship with great residents, and appreciate everyone's time and letting us attend this.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Okay, great to have you here. It's a great example of how our community groups can so effectively work with our elected officials and our village staff to help move things ahead in a positive way. Okay, it's 2:54. We always close right at 3 o'clock. So if you hang in there, if you have not been called on, please put the name of your community into the chat. I'm going to do a report for Liz Kunkel, who we did hit our 100-person max for registrations, and she wasn't able to get on. She wanted me to say that they had a fall plant sale because they didn't want to compete with Go Green Omet's spring plant sale. And it was incredibly popular, very successful. If your community wants to do a plant sale, you actually make money. So it's a win-win. You make money doing it, and you also add a lot more native plants to your community. They also, she also wanted me to remind all of you that you're all invited to attend Go Green Reads. That's our multi-community reading group. It's virtual. The next one is on the 19th of September, and we are reading Cradle to Cradle, which is very relevant to our discussion today. You can find the link to sign in if you go to gogreenwinnetka.org. We'll wrap up with a report from Wilmette. As some of this we've gone over, we are going to have a wonderful webinar next Wednesday on addressing climate change at home. We've done the work. Well, Jay's done the work. You can just direct your people to our webinar. We'd love to have your folks attend. We're also hosting a Renewable Energy Day on the 24th of September. That's a big day because that's the Illinois Solar Energy statewide tour. That's why all of our tours are on that day. But we're also adding some other things. We're going to do some geothermal tours. We are doing an EV show through Drive Electric Week. If you want to come to ours, please do. I am looking for EV cars that are not Teslas. Teslas are great. What we want is 12 different models. If you have an EV car that you are excited about and you'd like to show it at our show, please go to Drive Electric Week, type in Wilmette, and we'd love to have you join our show. We're also going to do a bike show. Sorry. We're also doing a bike show. We're doing e-bikes. We're doing cargo bikes, some really cool things like that. Fall is a good time for fall festivals like Go Green Glen Ellen's. We're going to have a seed picking with some kids games, some education about bird migration, that sort of thing. That's a nice thing to do. Tree walks are great in the fall as well. We also are working really hard with our schools locally. If your high school or your school district does not have a sustainability committee, that is a really wonderful thing to start. Nutria High School is going gangbusters. We're working with the Wilmette School District, and that's a really effective way to make some change because they're big instances. And if you're your park district, that's another great partner. If you're not working with your park district, that's a good opportunity. So we're also going to do a webinar in October on green feminine hygiene choices. I don't think that anyone else is doing that topic. We would love for your people to come join us. I don't have the exact date yet, but put that on your save the date. And then we're also going to do a green investing one. So we should talk to the other group that's doing that. So with that, it's 2:57. Really appreciate you all spending 2 hours with us. This was a fantastic discussion. There's so much that can and should be done with this issue. So a special thanks to Seema. Our next meeting will be the 15th of November, and topic to be determined, I think. If you have a particular topic that you think we should cover, be like Seema. Approach Kim and me and say, hey, I could pull this together. I think we could put together a good program. So Kim and I would appreciate any offers like that. We also, on the off months, we do have a much smaller meeting with just one or two people from communities, which is a little bit more no program, just discussion. We did not have that over the summer. We will have one of those in October. So if you are the leader of your community group, you'll get an invitation to that. So with that, Kim, is there anything you'd like to add?
I don't think so. Just if anybody's not on our email list, if there's anybody here who hasn't been getting our emails, go ahead to gogreenillinois.org and sign up so that you can get the notice of the next meeting.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Collectively, we are making a huge difference in our communities and in Chicagoland. So keep up the good work, and we'll see you all in 2 months. So thanks. Bye.
Bye.
All right, I've got another meeting, so I'm gonna, Kim, we're gonna end, and I've got to get to my next meeting. Okay.
Save the chat and the.
Oh yeah, the chat automatically saves, and I'll get it. Okay. Bye. Thanks so much, Seema. Bye bye.